I opted to create a business that just aggregates the skills of other permaculture experts. And what I bring to the table most is spotting opportunities and selling solutions and organizing the teams so that we can keep it moving and growing it, right? So I'll give you a few examples. I worked in the publishing world. I know a lot of people that print magazines all day long and print books, and they all have tree planting programs. So I went to those people that I worked with for years, and they trusted me. And I said, let me take over your tree planting program. Because I know the companies that they were using were just planting to plant so they could check a greenwashing box, right? And I've pitched the idea that you're going to really know a little bit more about what's happening in your tree planting program. We're going to put the right trees in the right places, and it's going to have multiple effects. It's going to solve multiple problems at once. They were 100% on board. Like, those are my first clients that I signed. I was like, great, this is amazing. And then partnered with the DEC up here with their tree planting programs and putting people to work and planting these trees. And it's being paid for by these corporations that, it's easy for us to just say they're doing the wrong thing, but hey, they're spending that money greenwashing somewhere. I'd rather them spend it where it's having purpose, right? So I decided to look at who I knew and leverage those relationships. Another was that because I live in a relatively small town, I've been involved in, local things with the town board and everything. I started looking into the local food scrap programs and realized that it was the timing. I walked into some board meetings that I asked for a meeting with our county executive, and they were just on the verge of launching a food scrap program, and they had no idea really what they wanted to do. So I started offering them solutions, and I'm able to offer jobs now to people that are doing food scrap programs. So I'm just the engine that's kind of holding it all together, and I'm finding the jobs, and then I'm aggregating them out to other people. So what does that look like? This is where we are right now. I started this business in November, and I'm merely connecting the people and creating the places to allow for easy access. And I could not do any of this first and foremost without the partnerships that I have. And, for example, I know I will never be as knowledgeable as Andrew Faust when it comes to site analysis or tree crops. I will never be as good of an educator as he is. And I know I'll never be as knowledgeable as David Harper when it comes to land trusts or conservation easements. And I know that I'll not be as good of a hempcrete or straw bale house builder as the team at Roundout Natural Builders. So I'm the engine that's propelling their work forward. And it's because I realized that my strength is to connect people and to market it to the world and market this work into a globalized movement. So I have a team of people that work on the awareness of this. And the main key, well, you can see here too, I have positions available. I'll talk about that at the end. But the main key is that the surplus goes back into the system. So we all have to feed ourselves and we all have to keep the lights on. But our business model is based on the idea that all the surplus goes back into further educational plans and to popularizing the movement. So this is why I am now partnered with the Permaculture Living Lands Trust, this not-for-profit that David Harper is running, along with Andrew Faust, to expand the mission for regional farm educational hubs and for tree crop nurseries. So there'll always be a not-for-profit element attached to my organization so that any surplus is always going back into and my dream is that there's going to be multiple, there's going to be lots of them. But the surplus has got to go back into the system. Otherwise, we're back with profit being a negative thing rather than being a tool that we use to really build this out in a way that it can scale.
We're going to talk about the power of using permaculture tools in a business setting. And really, business it's well known. There's a lot of books about how to run businesses and a lot of knowledge out there, but how do you run it regeneratively? And that's what we're really going to talk about. And by regeneratively, I mean healing the ecosystems, healing people, creating abundance out of the existing resources without polluting and harming the environment, etc. And one big way to do it is to use the permaculture tool. We don't always use the permaculture tools in the economics realm or in a lot of the invisible structure realms. We're good at applying them to food forests and things like that, but sometimes we haven't really thought through all of the things that are possible in the business world. The first thing that we want to do if you're starting a business, if you're running a business and you want to increase the yield or make it easier, we want to do a site assessment. And this can be very deep. You can do a business plan, but here's some extra things that you can do in your site assessment to increase the power of it. The first thing to ask is, what are your passions? And this is not just what you love to do, but what is important to you? And that's a really key question. And this is something that you can think about. You can take some notes and you might have some ideas as we go through this process, but write down these key questions and think about them, because sometimes we haven't always spotted what's really important. And not just what's important for your personal well-being, but what's important for you to do in this world. And that's, what effects do you want to create? What changes would you most like to make? And then what are your skills? And again, this is not just your professional skills, but can you work with difficult people? Do you have strong organizing skills? Can you self-pace and stay centered? Do well under stress? Can you stay focused? Can you think outside the box? Can you translate thinking outside the box into real world application? These are all skills that you actually need to be a good entrepreneur, to be really successful as an entrepreneur. And maybe you don't have some of these, and that's fine, because guess what? Somebody else does. And that's the whole purpose of this presentation is, know what you need, but don't be discouraged if you don't have all of that, because we'll share some ways that you can get it from the ecosystem. So then you ask, what does an ecosystem need? The business ecosystem, the human element ecosystem. What niches are needed so that other niches can survive? And this is really key. There's a lot of niches in the ecosystem, but sometimes we'll try to fill a niche that isn't ready to be filled. So say you have a redwood tree and you plant it in the middle of a degraded environment. It's probably not going to survive. And you may have this brilliant idea for business that the area just isn't ready for it. The soil hasn't been prepared. So what is needed first before you launch that business idea? Maybe that's the business model that you start with, or you find someone to work with who's going to provide that model so that your business is actually supported. So you have to think like an ecosystem. And we'll go over some different ways of doing that. The other thing you want to do is survey. You want to find out what the ecosystem needs and not assume, because every community is different and is a little bit at a different stage of process or succession. So some communities might have a really developed local food movement, and you can plug right into that, and it's already supportive. And then other communities might not have any. They might not even know what that is. So where do you start? It's really important to understand that part of what you're trying to do and whether your community is ready for that or not. And then because if you don't do that and you try to plant your redwood in a desert, you're going to struggle. And so we just want to make it easier for you by responding to the site as it is and working with that condition of the site. Now, how do you find that out? You ask, and that's surveying, asking your friends, neighbors, strangers on the bus, whatever. It's fun. Once you start doing that, it's really fun, and the answers are very interesting. And what are the other elements in the ecosystem? Now, there might be missing elements, and that's very interesting when you're designing a guild in a business, or designing your own business, deciding where you're going to plug in. For instance, If you don't have a local food movement and you have a food desert, well, that is what you need to address. What are some of the other elements in ecosystem? You have money. Are you in a high poverty area or a wealthy community? You have population density. It's much easier to sell certain services in different densities. If you're trying to sell a bunch of backyard plants in a rural area where you're 40 miles away from anybody, that might be difficult. But you could find someone in the city that's willing to house your plants as a storefront, work out some kind of arrangement. Now you've solved that. If you're trying to have a retreat in the middle of the city, again, that's the wrong place to have it. You want to be in a rural, isolated area for that. So you might be able to find someone that can help you to do that. And now you're starting the guild process.
So going now towards this conversation of tapping non-monetary wealth and this concept that we talk about within permaculture as the 8 forms of capital. You know, Ethan Rowland and Gregory Landau wrote that well-known article probably, 10 or 15 years ago now. And it is a great concept, and it has really completely shifted my life. It is not original to permaculture, but they kind of framed it in a permaculture way. And so this is how we talk about it within permaculture. And so we've got all of these forms of capital where, to my mind, this is where the true richness of our lives exists. So we start on the left with financial capital, which is the one we all know and operate in most regularly out in society. And I'm just going to walk us quickly around this this diagram, which I love. KT Shepard gave permaculture such a gift with this image. Experiential capital, so those are our skills, the things we know how to do when we volunteer and we bring our skills into a landscape, or, you know, if we know how to repair a bike or cook a meal. You know, these are skills that we have. They're things we've learned through experience. We've got spiritual capital, which can be a religious faith-based thing, but it doesn't have to be. It can just be your yoga practice or however you center yourself and find meaning in this crazy universe. Social capital, you know, those are our connections with each other, the interactions we have with our neighbors. If you're part of the PTA at your children's school, you know, the network at your church, when you get a job through a friend, you know, because your friend works somewhere and they had an opening, you're tapping your social capital to get that job. Cultural capital is our shared music and ethnic foods and films and art and history. Intellectual capital is our knowledge, our creativity. It's what we learn in school from books. Material capital, these are the physical things in our lives, the computer you're at or the phone you're holding to watch this, the building you're in, the car you drive or the bike you ride, the shoes you wear. These are material, tangible forms of capital. And then there's living capital, which of course in permaculture, I think we probably have a deep, deep love for living capital, the food forests in our yards, the parks in our neighborhoods, the air we breathe, the water. These are all forms of capital. And if you look at it, these other forms of capital besides financial capital, what we really want are these other forms of capital. It's just that our society is set up right now that the gateway to these other forms of capital is financial capital. Well, and I will say, I also include 3 other forms of capital when I think about this. I think about time as a form of capital. I think about attention, which is similar to time as a form of capital. We see what Mark Zuckerberg and others have done to capitalize on our attention, how much money our attention is worth. And then health. I think our health, physical and mental health, these are also forms of capital. And again, so what we want in our lives are these other forms of capital, and the financial capital is just the means we use right now to get them. So we can think about how to tap these other forms of capital more directly so we can bypass money. for example. So I guess I should step back. When I think about the concept of obtain a yield, and then I think about these 8 or multiple forms of capital, along with that idea of obtain a yield, I think we can do both with these 8 forms of capital. I think we can use them to save money, by thinking about how to bypass financial capital to save money and get them more directly or access them more directly. But I also think that we can start thinking about them more in terms of earning money from them, and recognizing them as forms of wealth. So it's again, getting in the habit of asking ourselves, how can I obtain a yield from this? And I include at the bottom here a word of caution. I don't want us to turn every relationship or every material form of capital or skill we have into a form of extraction for earning money. But I do think it's a muscle we can build and flex, and we can do more of in a positive way. So we can go back and start looking at these other forms of capital in our lives and thinking about, how could I obtain a yield, again, with that word of caution, in a sustainable, non-extractive way?
I think that when we're creating a business where we're doing regenerative design, whether it's a land-based permaculture business or some other way that we're trying to improve things for ourselves and other people, if we can think about this inspiration that came to me from Starhawk's book, The Earth Path, she talks about making choices and choosing values. When we make choices, we can choose based on our values. And as we're choosing our values, we're thinking about what is sacred to each of us. And that doesn't necessarily mean sacred in a religious way. It can be what is sacred to us in terms of the land, our families. Are we bird lovers? Do we love those monarch butterflies? What is sacred to each of us? And I would contend that nearly everybody has something that feels really sacred to them. So as we hold those values and we think about, or are business owners and operators, we have a great responsibility and opportunity to ask, how each of the decisions that we make along the way impacts the whole. And that whole might be the planet, it might be our community, it might be our building that we're working in, it might be a piece of land that we're working with and working on. And we make decisions all the time. And how can we make those consciously, and how can we make those decisions in a way that reflects our values? And, one of the really simple business examples, many people can relate to that old standard, the business card. So do you get that printed at a local printer? Do you also use recycled paper, environmentally friendly inks? Or do you go online and get the cheapest business cards you can find, that are coming maybe from overseas on a ship, on an airplane? So every day we make decisions in our business that we have the chance to either do something that's regenerative or degenerative. And I highly recommend, if you haven't thought about your values and how to incorporate those into your business, that you take the time to do that. I believe that any business, whether it's a DBA, doing business as, which is how I do much of my work, just as a single shingle shop, we can build into our business, and this is part of the pricing conversation, because pricing influences how much money we have left over for what we might call profit. So as we're operating our businesses, large and small, we can do things like pledge that we're going to give a certain percentage of our profits, or even our revenues. It doesn't have to just be the profits, to a local indigenous community to help them do the work that they're doing? Can we give some of our revenue to Black farmers near us who are working to reclaim their relationship with agriculture and growing food for the community in some way? Can we lift up businesses that are owned by women, by LGBTQ folks? And also, we can look at ways that our business can support other organizations and individuals who are doing environmentally friendly work. We can also look at alternative currencies and how we can participate in those, like time banks or barter systems that might exist in our communities.
So there are many, many solutions that could be brought to bear, and I only want to address them strategically with some tactical examples because every situation calls for a different set of solutions. So, permaculture ethic 1, caring for the earth. What are some of the solutions that we could bring to bear to demonstrate that value system? Regenerate natural buffers, riparian areas, deltas, the list goes on and on. And we can do this at a very broad scale or do it right in our own backyard. We want to restore the health and function of forests, grasslands, aquatics, deserts, arid uplands. All these ecosystems have evolved with natural disasters, not again at the pace and scale that we're seeing now, but they have built-in resilience to these situations. And we, through our human intervention, have often altered their function. We've altered their constituents. In the case of forests, removed the biggest and the best, and then decided to eliminate wildfires because we thought they were an unacceptable natural disaster, without recognizing their role in regeneration of forests. Likewise with deltas and riverine environments, shorelines, they're built to take some setbacks and then they refurbish themselves. Well, in our quote infinite wisdom, we've said, well, instead of a shoreline, why don't we have a retaining wall? You know how long that lasts. So some other things that we can do, and this illustration here, I want to thank the Missouri Botanical Garden for having a really clever arrangescaping illustration here, which is, I encourage you to take a closer look at that by going to their website. But in this single diagram, they illustrate adding over a dozen different features: windbreaks, buffers, natural drainage, catchment, wetlands, and increasing biodiversity. And they're showing that at the backyard scale, but those same techniques and tools can be used on a much broader scale as well. Okay, second permaculture ethics, caring for people. We really need to work on this one because we have become what we believe to be independent entities that can certainly take care of ourselves and, like I said, go to the store if you need something. We need to disabuse people of that notion that they can function well and happily, completely independently, because that's not reality, particularly in the face of a natural disaster. So we need to help rebuild social networks, connectivity, and inclusivity. We need to educate in holistic design, preparedness, resilience, and biomimetic solutions. And biomimetic is simply copying nature. What does nature do in this situation? That's usually where we find the best permaculture solutions. And very importantly, encourage mutual aid. We all have skills, we all have different sets of resources. Learning to share those, trade, barter, mutual support, those are all really important. And what you'll find in almost every natural disaster are really beautiful stories coming forth of people helping people. People that maybe had their own home wiped out, but they know how to build, or they know how to rewire or something. They will help someone else, and hopefully in turn, someone will help them. So when we create that circular economy, it really strengthens our communities tremendously and is a very important way of caring for people. Permaculture ethics, the third one, fair share. Now, some people interpret this as future share, sustainability, whatever definition you apply, it's all heading in the same direction. Some good examples that I like to share are just how we deal with water. Water is a commons. Air is part of our commons. How we treat that water, how do we harvest it? How do we, in the face of our development, which has altered its normal patterns and systems, how do we try to restore some of those? Again, biomimetically, with this catchment basin in Seattle, an example from Brad Lancaster's work. We're harvesting water, we're conserving it, and we're distributing it. We're sharing it. It's going places. It's being spread throughout the ecosystem in the neighborhood, literally. Again, the concept of equity, equity and access to goods, services, experiences. This is important for everyone, not only for current generations, but future generations. So we have to be thinking when we work in our design field, what is this going to look like in 30 years? What resources are going to be available for those people 30, 50, 100 years from now? What benefits are we building in that are sustainable and not exclusive to one group, member, family, whatever, but they are available to all? And then, of course, food systems. Food systems are, well, food, water, air, there you have it. Food system based on regenerative practices are absolutely critical. And if we want to keep feeding ourselves, we're going to have to build soil and start using practices that support life and not the practices that are currently used in industrial agriculture, which are conducive to death. And I say that in all sincerity, and I'm not exaggerating.
As we're doing this as a homestead, I also partnered with a project called Jungle Project, which is a community-based project all about trees, training, and trade. And what's very unique about this project is we don't purchase land, we're coming into a community and we are seeing who is already doing regenerative agriculture, and let's enhance your already existing model and bring in more income producing crops. And we focus on breadfruit. So anyone here heard of breadfruit? Raise your hand. Oh, breadfruit is miraculous fruit. It's like a cannonball sized fruit that grows on a tree, and many people and research has shown that breadfruit just could be a solution to many of the world's problems, to hunger, to reforesting with edible fruit-bearing trees. Just one tree can produce up to 400 pounds of fruit a year. It's the most ecological carbohydrate in the world, and it's like a potato on a tree. So this is something that I'm super passionate about, and I partner with Jungle Project to really accelerate and scale up this program. We have 15 farming families in Costa Rica, and we guarantee purchasing back 80% of what they produce. And that's really unique because so many companies and regenerative enterprises say, okay, plant this, but then in 4 or 5 years, they're not there to buy it back. And that's the whole point, to increase the income of our local population and indigenous so that they have the food sovereignty and the abundance of nature. So, like I said, breadfruit is so abundant. You can see here, this is just one truck full of breadfruit, and we bring this breadfruit in to dehydrate it, and then we're producing a product, breadfruit flour. And this can be made into anything you'd use wheat for, and it's gluten-free. And just one tree produces a bountiful fruit for up to 75 years.
Within the past few hours, you ate something. A sandwich, a bowl of cereal, a taco, a pizza. The odds are good that most of your last meal came from grains like rice, wheat, and corn that need to be replanted every year. 50% of the world's calories come from grains, but there's a cost. They grow best on open land, so they're incompatible with forests. They can require a lot of fertilizer. And they're so cheap that smallholder farmers can't make a living without mechanization and industrialization. The alternative would be something that grows on a tree, but those tend to be fruits like peaches, limes, or apples. They're tasty, but you usually need something else too. But let's take another look at fruit. What if there was a fruit that grew on a tree year after year that provided the caloric punch of grains without all the ecological drawbacks? Like bread, but in a fruit. Bread. Fruit? Breadfruit? Yep, breadfruit. Every year, a breadfruit tree creates 800 pounds of massive bowling ball-sized tree potatoes that are packed with nutrients, year after year after year. Breadfruit is way more productive than other crops. It's incredibly resilient, and it can grow alongside other trees and crops in an agroforestry system. Jungle Project plants breadfruit trees, trains farmers on best practices, and trades the produce to keep the cycle going. Trees, training, and trade. To learn more about our mission and how to help, visit our website.
Breadfruit grows in places where the world is most hungry, and it grows along the tropical equator. And we believe that breadfruit, if it were spread out to Africa, to India, to Southeast Asia, planted already with the existing agroforestry systems that are there, such as coconuts or cacao, that this could really make the tropics the most abundant place. And maybe Western world, we might think of the tropics as a third world country, or not as progressive as, say, the Western world. But I really don't like to think about comparing in different ways, because the tropics is such an abundant place that there's 4 seasons a year, and growing can happen all the time. And with breadfruit harvest, there's 2 harvests a year. And that's our solution, agroforestry systems. So the crops that we focus on with Jungle Project is breadfruit, bananas, cacao, and different roots such as turmeric or ginger. And our mission is to help small farmers plant food forests and provide a market to sell their products and to create family self-sufficiency. Here's a little bit more about Jungle Project. If you want to learn more, you can also go to our website and see all of what we're up to. And this is us training in the field. So we are training on how to make bioferment, how to build soil, bokashi. And many of the farmers might know some of these practices because it's in their family, and a lot of locals have not converted to conventional agriculture, which is, just happened in the last 100 years, where we see a large use of chemical pesticides. And actually, Costa Rica, sadly, is the highest user of chemical pesticides in the world. So here we are teaching to the Jungle Project communities about different topics such as bioferment. We're talking about how to create soil, how to prevent pests and diseases. And a lot of what we do is just educating our farmers so that they can really be empowered to spread this knowledge to their neighbors. And many of our farmers that join us at Jungle Project are friends of friends. So it is rippling. The regenerative movement is rippling outwards, and we're seeing more and more people wanting to grow in a way that is in harmony with the earth and bringing back biodiversity.
I was very lucky in this context to have had my experience living in Latin America and working with fair trade cooperatives. I was very familiar with the cooperative model, or with a version of the cooperative model. Cooperative businesses span all different kinds of businesses, but certainly the agricultural sector is extremely well represented in cooperative owned businesses, especially on the production end. So the fair trade system has an enormous number of resources. I was able to see both the power of the cooperative model in terms of the empowerment of individuals to own a business, the transformation, especially for people that historically have had resources like land and business ownership and access to capital stripped from them fairly actively. And so I was able to see both the transformative power of that, and I was also able to see some of the pitfalls through years of working with fair trade cooperatives, and ways where an overly romantic vision of what a co-op could be could really be damaging. And so I really felt I was extremely committed to this business transformation, partially because I was very proud, and I still am very proud, to be part of a global cooperative business network. It's an amazing network of people that are incredibly smart, incredibly generous, and just have done some life-changing, world-changing work. So I came to it from that perspective, and I will share my screen so that what I'm going to share here, can you all see this hilarious photograph of the founding members of RDG?
Yep, looks good.
So what I'm going to share is a slideshow that we put together to introduce all of our employees to our co-op and our co-op model. And this is a slideshow that we share with an employee at some point during the first 2 years of working at RDG. So anybody who works for our company for 2 years is eligible to request to join as a worker owner, and there's a process for that I'll get into. So most people that work at RDG will see this presentation at some point, and we're very transparent about our process. So regardless of whether an employee wants to join as a worker owner or not, which it's not required, everyone will get exposed to a little bit of this while working with us. Okay, so a co-op. What is a co-op? It's a worker-owned business. It means that people who work there, not everybody, but people who work there own the business. And so we're required to both do our work that we are employed to do on a daily level, and that's called the operations, as well as participate in higher level decisions for the company, like financing, strategic planning, how many people we should employ, and how much we can afford to do that. How much can we put toward that? One of the most challenging things, I think, for the company to kind of grapple, and we're still sorting it out, is this differentiation between governance and operations within a business. And it's really essential for a cooperative business to have this. And it's something that can get very, very muddy when you have your own business. And it was completely entangled with the LLC. So it's been like sort of, taking a very snarled bit of yarn and untangling it.
Yeah.
So your governance in your company is everything that has to do with how the business is managed, nothing to do with day-to-day operations. The worker owners, who are members up here at this top level, are in charge of the governance of a company, and it's really complicated. And in order to expedite that process, we elect a board of directors, and our board of directors at the moment is 5 members. So initially we were only 7 members. We're electing 5. It feels kind of funny to do that, but now we're 8 members this year. We welcomed our first new co-op member since we founded, and hopefully we'll continue doing that in the future. And so 5-member board of directors will really be represented. The 5 board of director members, they are in charge of hiring the managers for the business. So there's an accountability here. We own the business. We want to make sure it's run well. We want to make sure that it's financially successful. And so the board of directors, who may be any position in the company, right? If they're not necessarily bosses or high level in day-to-day operations, but they're in charge of hiring the managers for the company and then checking in to make sure that the business is running. The managers are managing day-to-day business. So they're the people that are doing HR. They're making sure the business is profitable. They're looking ahead to be like, do we have more projects coming in the pipeline? Do we have enough capacity? Do we need to hire people? They're really focused on the products that we're putting out there, the clients. The managers are hiring employees. The employees might be member or owners or become member owners, and they might not. So this blue-white scale at the bottom shows like even our managers, who right now are 2 of our 3 founding members, don't have to be member owners in the future. They can be, if one of our managers left, we could hire somebody else into a management position who wasn't an owner, a business owner, at the point that they were hired. So this is not the most elegant graphic, but for us, it's really helpful to see how this differentiation of governance and operations interacts, that really the governance and how you run your business, the decisions that you make, the long-term decisions that you make, everybody has access to that who wants to, who works here for 2 years, but there's still a streamlined process down so that we're not getting together, all 10 of us, to decide what everybody has to do every day, because that would be chaos. And that's chaos. That's not cooperatively run business.
I particularly care for this cartoon. For a fair selection, everybody has to take the same exam. Please climb that tree. And this to me is conventional education. Everybody's in a room and they're all, you all have to be following the same rules. And that's pretty tricky. And so Albert Einstein said, everybody is a genius, but if you judge a fish by its ability to climb a tree, it will live its whole life believing that it is stupid. And what we want to be doing is encouraging people to really embrace their inner wisdom and the knowledge that they have, and to share that knowledge as much as possible. I want to move on to the topic of learning styles. And that is something that I have researched and have embraced in the work that I do, and moving away from that conventional type of, teacher in front and just throwing information, at you. And so learning styles are various ways to, approaches to learning. And it is also a guide in the way we offer the information. So, how are you getting the information across? And what I tend to do is I tend to give maybe a 20-minute slideshow and, talk about the topic, that I'm sharing. We then will do breakout groups for maybe 20 minutes where people are working together and answering maybe a critical thinking question. And then we go and we do some sort of hands-on project. So within an hour's class, we are bringing in a multiple sensory approach. So we're doing visual and auditory. So we're showing, I'm talking about what it is that this particular topic, I'm offering some visuals on that topic. And then we go outside and we do kinesthetic learning. We're actually doing it. And these are some ways of changing the educational paradigm. Understanding how people learn is another key way to be planning your curriculum and modules. This is a resource from the National Training Laboratories in Bethel, Maine, which is one of the primary research institutes in the US. And they came up with this, average student retention rates. And you'll see at the very top is lecture, where not a whole lot of people can retain information in lecturing. Reading information, maybe homework. Some people are voracious readers, and others might just get 10% retention in reading. Then there's the audiovisual learners, and they might actually get 80% of their retention, though a lot of people only will get 20% through audiovisual. And that's what this is. This is an audiovisual, and I'm hoping that maybe you get more than 20% out of this in retaining, but we shall see. And then 30% is demonstration, when like I'm up in the middle of the classroom and I'm demonstrating maybe a shake test, or and then 75%, you see, I would have other people doing their own shake test. And then there's that 50% in discussion. And then you see that 90% of people learn the most and retain the most by teaching others. So, there again, we are really thinking about changing the educational paradigm. I wanted to share with you also this particular person, Howard Gardner, and he writes and has done a lot of work on multiple intelligences. I won't go very detailed into it. I just wanted to show you this graphic, give you an example of, this particular person who has devised this information and then has worked in teaching it. And so we talk about, being linguistically word smart, utilizing the right words for the right audience, making sure it's logical and that it works, that we're including nature in the work that we do and information we share, that we're showing some pictures, that we get out there and we do some, body work, as far as getting kinesthetically involved with the topic that we're doing a hands-on project. You might even include music as part of it. When I was teaching in the elementary school, and one of the things we taught was composting, and I had a friend of mine who was a musician, came in because she had composed a song on composting, and so she taught all the kids this composting song, which was really a fun way of sharing information. And then again, this interpersonal relationships of working together with people, and also the opportunity of working on your own in an intrapersonal, so that, and some people are just really much more comfortable working on their own. And I really honor where everyone is in the classroom. Okay, so some models of education I wanted to share with you that I'm encouraging is the dialogue, active engagement, and non-hierarchical. The teacher is also a student, and the students are also teachers. And that is really one of the reasons I love to teach, is because I'm always learning. So this transformational learning is, you think about, why teach like this with the teacher up front and everybody sitting in these nice straight rows, when learning can happen like this, where the teachers are just part of the dynamic, but not the person who is always up front talking to participants. So this is another way of thinking of models of learning and education. Another style of learning is collaborative, where participants create this learning community. And one of the things that you'll notice about me is that I tend to loop learn or repeat certain things. And so it takes adults sometimes 6 times to hear something before they remember it. And that's one of my teaching techniques, is that I tend to repeat things, and maybe in different kinds of ways. And also, just as an aside, in teaching like a topic like soils, and then I talk about animals, well, then I loop back to soils and talk about, well, how do animals assist in the soil building process? So that's a bit about loop learning. So the idea of collaborative learning, you're sharing ideas, you're creating discussions, you're building community, you're brainstorming, you're creating these interactions. And so that is something that I always encourage in the teaching experience. And this on the right side, this is a course that I taught at our Eco Village, and it's people who were doing presentations and sharing the information that they were learning with other participants. And so they created a collaborative learning experience within the group. And then they shared that experience with all of us.